Hi, I'm Jim Knotts, President and CEO of the Vietnam Veterans Memorial Fund. Welcome to today's virtual reading of the names. 2022 marks the 40th anniversary of the dedication of the Vietnam Veterans Memorial in Washington, D.C. As part of our commemoration, we'll host an in-person reading of the names at the wall from November 7th through 10th, 2022, when all 58,281 names on the wall will be read aloud. In the lead up to that event, we'll be reading names each day online while sharing the photos of these heroes. For our daily virtual reading, the names of the service members will be read by month and day of death between the years 1956 and 1975 in alphabetical order for the given day. We apologize in advance for any mispronunciations. Know that our readers are doing their best to honor these service members. We hope you'll listen and watch each day and share with others as we remember and honor those who gave their lives during the Vietnam War.
Otis Lee Allen, Charles Delmar Allen, Jr., Richard Roland Arsenal, Joseph William Aubin, Everell Floyd Avey, James Wesley Ayers, Nillan K. Bacon, Bobby Joe Bearfield, Merrill Barnes, Edward Earl Beecham, Gary Edward Becker, William Anthony Belland, George Dewey Bennett, Kevin Wayne Bowdish, Alton Boyce, Kenneth Eugene Bradley, Roy Lee Brager, Fleming B. Brainerd III, Michael William Braun, William John Bresnahan, Jr., Terry Lee Brody, Cecil Angus Broom, Jr., Billy Ray Brown, William Joseph Bunting, Howard Earl Burdick, Thomas Raymond Burns, George Wallace Burr, Domenico Cacciola, Rudy Cardenas, Michael William Carey, Harry Kenneth Cartret, Anthony Mack Cass, Robert Hewiston Chandler, Harold John Clifford, George Lee Cobb, James Warren Cockrell, Jr., James Edward Coleman, Michael Howard Collins, Thomas Arthur Conklin, Patrick Connor, Robert Wilkinson Cook, James Patrick Crawford, Richard Way Krickenberger, Carl Wayne Crow, Arthur Albert Crowell, Charles Alvin Crump, Wilbert Wayne Kutch, David Roy Cushing, William Ray Dalrymple, Jesse James Danner, Jack Dempsey Deese, Arthur Andrew Dane, Lawrence Rudin Dodd, Jack Leroy Dodson, William L. Dornberg, Jr., Edward Daniel Drosky, John Frederick Dugan, Ronald Wayne Durbin, Brock Dennis Elliott, Lester Irby, Richard Ferrales, James Farrow, Edward Stephan Fisher, Terence Patrick Fitzgerald,
Roger Lee Fortune, Benny Edward Foster, Timothy K. Foster, Dennis Willard Frazier, Philip Ray Gaines, James Leonard Gales, Philip Lyle Gamble, Jr., David Jose Garcia, Raymond Ignacio Garcia, Geronimo Garcia Soto, Michael John Gardner, Monte Leroy Gates, Ralph Allen Gerhardt, James Loy Geigel, Charles Donette Gibson, Gary Alvin Glandon, Robert Gordon Goddard, Louis Henry Godley, Daniel Eric Goldsmith, Thomas Wendell Goodrich, Robert Joseph Gosselin, Martin Joseph Grace Jr., Bruce Elliott Graham, Michael Jefferson Greeley, Robert Lowell Greenstreet, Ronald Eugene Greer, Terence Hastings Griffey, Sammy Manuel Gullert, Gordon Eldon Gullett, Harrison Leroy Haley, Nathaniel Halliburton Jr., George William Harris, William Edward Hawkins, Clifford Earl Haynes Jr., Stephen Wayne Hendricks, Sterling Harold Hill, Allen Hill Jr., James Francis Hilliard, Clyde Stephen Himes, Craig Barker Holt, Jean Edward Honcharoff, Claude Howard, Hansel Everett Howell, Jr., Robert Hughes, Harvey Edward Humphrey, Richard Carl Hunt, Richard Lafayette Incroci, Roger Vernon Inscore, Will Isaac Jr., Frank Jameson, Stephen Michael Janeda, Emmett Germany Jr., Clayton W. Johnson, James Doyle Johnson, David Keith Johnson, James Edward Johnson, Xavier Johnson, Harry Wilbur Johnson, Thomas George Jones, Larry Jones, Siegfried R. Karlstrom, Alan Howard Kellerman, Randall Wayne Kelpine, Norman Richard Kidd Jr.,
William Gregory Landon, Thomas Allen Lane, Walter Robin Lang, Clarence Rosaire Lavoie, Joseph Dallas LeGrand Jr., Walter Allen Lindsay, Max Lisenby, Lowell Ray Lloyd, Thomas Arthur Lawler, Larry Frank Marcus, Chris Ronald Martinez, Melvin L. Martz, Robert Gerald Marvin, Joseph Matthews, Jean Fletcher Matthews, Henry Lee MacArthur, Harold Raymond McCord Jr., Robert Lowell McCurdy, Gerald Francis McDonald, Mitchell Lee McGuire, Wayne Robert Mackenzie, James Joseph Menart, Donald Earl Messerosh, Robert Dennis Millen Jr., David Harvey Miller, Edward Martin Miller, Benjamin George Malika, Jimmy Lee Moore, Hercules Lee Moore, Ramon J. Morales, Shelton Morgan, John Henry Morgan, Jimmy Keith Morrison, Robert Lloyd Mosher, Oxley Carrington Moultrie, Larry Donald Mullen, Ernest Cedillo Munoz, Michael Murphy, Stephen Edward Murray, Thomas Murrin Jr., Eric Darrell Nudo, David Lee Neiman, George Hobart No, Edward Terry O'Brien, William Bryan O'Halloran, Yuan John Ernest Parker, Leroy Pegros, Ray Lee Penland Jr., Thomas Wayne Peterson, Larry James Pearson, Richard Edward Potter, Daniel Lee Powell, James Conrad Powers, Albert Joseph Rappold Jr., William Raymond Riley, Benjamin Richardson, Richard Lee Risch, Michael Conrad Roll, John David Rogers, Edwin Roman Rodriguez, Alan James Ruddle, Anthony John Salerno, Scott Edward Saylor, John Edward Schoen,
Vernon Earl Schrock, Robert Eugene Scott, Kenneth William Scully, Dwayne Michael Selby, Henry Earl Shelton, Robert H. Sigholtz Jr., Larry James Sinegal, Paul Darrell Skelton II, Willie B. Skrine Jr., Jack Smazzo, William Eugene Smith, Ronald Lee Smith, David William Smith, Gary Martin Smith, Gary Kent Smith, Joseph Preston Smith, Robert Smith Jr., Luke Andrew Smith Jr., Dennis Milton Sollenberger, Alan Wayne Staff, John Marvin Stenberg, Laddie C. Steerwalt, Richard Dwayne Stalker, Reed Tyrone Stiers, Lauren Cleveland Surles, Douglas Roland Sutton, Teddy Jean Talley, Morris E. Thomas, James Titmus III, Donald Richard Troxell, Rosalio Valencia, Alvin Chris Van Riesen, Robert Clay Van Vliet, Alexander George Wainio, George Edward Walker Jr., Jerry Gordon Waller, Robert Washington, Greg Weaver, John Albion Wheatley, Curtis Whitted, Arnold Grimm Wilkening III, Richard Edward Wilkins, Jerry Leonard Williams, Frederick H. Williams Jr., Franklin Joe Willison, Thomas John Winklevoss, Paul M. Wooldridge Jr., Nabil Mahmoud Youssef,